Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Maurice Brown Show. We have a very special guest today with us, an actor who has had the privilege to work in Christian films since 2016, including such films as Happy Together, The Over Mountain Men, Duel, Night Guard, and Counter Column. Ladies and gentlemen, with no further ado, please welcome to the show, Jonathan Wessel. What's up, Jonathan? How are you, bro?
Doing good, Maurice. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Hey, man, it's great having you on the show today, man. You know, we're living, Jonathan, as you well know, in a COVID-19 world. This pandemic's been crazy. As an actor, as an entertainer, it can be difficult for guys like us. I'm a comedian and actor. It's just difficult. How are you navigating through all of this stuff right now?
Well, starting off with the pandemic first hit, everything kind of came to a screeching halt, as I'm sure everyone knows. So things kind of got really slow for a while. And so at that point, I began to think about creating my own content. So I actually created a YouTube channel and started producing acting tutorials. And I did like a reaction video on there and things of that nature, and started delving into creating short comedy sketches and short films. And that's kind of how I bridged the gap during that downtime, as it were. So I created a short film called Two Roads at that time, which was actually a finalist in 2 categories for the Quarantine Film Festival, which occurred, I think that was like April is when that happened. So I had that going on. And then since then, things started to open back up again. So I was able to be a part of, I think, 3 different projects just this year, actually, and attended a film festival, spoke actually at a film festival last year. So things are kind of getting back on track, but it's still kind of slow going.
What's the protocol like on set?
It varies by set. Some want you to get tested. Well, most of them want you to get tested beforehand and test negative. Some are, or I would say most all are requiring masks and social distancing. But the level depends too on the state that the film is taking place in and the individual production. So it's kind of hard to put it all in one lump.
Definitely understandable, Jonathan. You can't really put this stuff in one lump. There's so many different angles that this thing comes at you. So I definitely understand that. Hopefully we'll be out of this stuff and back to normal. Hopefully before I'm hoping before the year is out, but we'll see what happens. Now you have a project called Night Guard, which I think is really, really an interesting project. It's a nouveau riche idea, quite frankly and honestly, in the faith-based world, I do believe. Tell us a little bit about this project, Night Guard.
Well, Night Guard is my first lead role in an extended short film. Most of the films I've done in leading roles have been much smaller, like 5-7 minutes or whatever. This one is 25 minutes long, so it's a more ambitious project. Definitely for me, as a lead actor, it was more of an ambitious project. And it's my first time ever playing a superhero, so it was very unique in that respect. A lot of different things I had to learn to do. But it's the story about a comic book nerd who begins fighting crime in order to find an urban legend who's been protecting the city. And I was really honored and blessed to be cast as the main character in this film because it's got such a great story. Weaved into the message, weaved into the story so well that it's very entertaining. Very moving at the same time. It's got a lot of great elements, and we actually shot it in northern Illinois and Wisconsin, so actually not too far from where I live, which was actually nice as well. And even though there were some difficult or unpleasant aspects to the film, which is typically the case with most films, you're going to go into locations that are a little uncomfortable to work in for various reasons, or you're working in interesting situations, but the crew was so professional and everyone was supportive of each other that it felt like family, and was in that respect, was a very wonderful environment to work in. And I think that all of that greatly contributed to the finished product, which I think turned out really well.
So what were the difficult circumstances like exactly?
The ones that come to mind, I remember it was our last day of shooting.
Okay.
Yeah, it was our last day of shooting, and we had for the big final scene of the film. We had to shoot that at a water reclamation plant, and it was I don't think it was super cold out. We were actually indoors, but there wasn't any heat that I can remember. So it was on the chillier side, but it was a water reclamation plant, so it was very, very stinky. It just smelled so bad.
Yeah, yeah.
And when we first walked in, got on the property, we were just like, "Oh my goodness, that is just terrible." And it took us quite a while to kind of adjust to it, so that way we didn't notice it as much. Once we were actually filming and action was called, it wasn't as noticeable because we're really focused on what we're doing. But the minute we had a break, it was just like, oh. But to be fair, it was less annoying indoors. The minute we stepped outside after we got done filming for that day, it was just like we got hit with it again. It was like not the best thing. But when it comes to filmmaking, you go to places in order to be able to, have the best possible location, the best look, what you're getting for your film. So sometimes you have to go to places that may not be the best in that respect. But we all worked through it. We all had great attitudes, and that was great. And I know with the night guard mask that I had to wear for part of the film, it was very difficult to see. Vision was quite limited peripherally and everything, so that made the fight scenes and such a little more challenging than they would have been otherwise. And we also, some people had to tried the mask on, and we're talking about how it was very difficult to actually, breathe, especially when you're doing a lot of action stuff. But I didn't want to take it off too much because it was a pain to have to put back on and get situated right and everything. So I opted to leave it on until we were moving on to a scene where I didn't need it. And then there was just other conditions too, mainly outdoor weather kind of things, really cold nights for a couple of days as well. So those kind of things, but that's fairly typical for most feature films or short films or just filmmaking in general.
Well, I had a chance to be in the film Love Different in 2016 with Tommy Ford and Jen Gotson Chandler. And that was the first film that I'd ever been a part of with some really good actors. But I had no idea how difficult things or circumstances can be on set, particularly when it comes to retakes. And, if you got a lot of verbiage in a scene or whatever, you got to do it over and over again because they want different angles or somebody messes up or what have you. But no, it's a lot of fun doing the film, but there are all kind of things that can happen. Now, what inspired Night Guard?
I'm not sure I can actually answer that question.
Okay.
I haven't actually talked with Nathaniel a lot about what his inspiration was, other than I know he feels that there is definitely a place for superhero films in the Christian film industry, and thinks it's a very, I believe you used the term niche market earlier. It's very much so that, and I think he feels that that's a really good way to bring a gospel message or just a Christian message around through something that's more I guess in line with a lot of what's going on in Hollywood right now, with all the Marvel films and shows and stuff going on, this kind of thing could get pick up more attention, as it were. I don't know exactly what inspired him to create this particular character.
Well, I would say just by observing, as just a typical fan or viewer, I'm watching it and being a Christ follower, I'm thinking this is a great way to invoke the message without, hitting anyone over the head or anything like that, or, getting on a soapbox, what have you. And it was just very subtle the way it was introduced into the short. And I thought it was awesome. And it was just like, okay, so now, because you've allowed the viewer to become invested into the program before you get there. It's
right.
Like, oh man, this is interesting. It's funny. Hey, wow, it's a superhero movie. Oh man, it's kind of like Peter Parker. Oh man, I like this. So the viewer, the superhero fan, which I am, I love superhero flicks. And so you're watching it, and so if you're a non-believer, by the time you get to that point, you're kind of invested into the program.
Yeah.
So it's now it's too late to bail because you're like you're kind of into it now. It's like, oh man, I didn't see that coming, but I don't care. I love this, and you just keep with it because you're not bashing anyone over the head with it, but it's like that element of salvation, that element of Christ remains a subtle presence through the short.
Yes,
and
for sure.
dude, I'm going to be praying for you guys. I hope that this thing turns into either a series or a feature-length film. It's got all the potential for it. It
Definitely does.
Yeah. The director, Nathaniel, this is a difficult name to pronounce, but I'm just going to go for it. Nathaniel Skexnader, I believe. He's the filmmaker. Tell us a little bit about working with Nathaniel. What was that like?
Okay. So Nathaniel didn't actually direct the film. He's the writer, producer of it. Our director was actually Dominic Petrie. And I'm really close to both of them. But Nathaniel was very much on set and had a lot, a lot of input and everything. But both of them are great. Nathaniel, I've actually worked with on several projects now. A couple of other short films and things like that we've done together that he's actually directed. So I've worked with him in his being a director. So he is just very, as a writer, he is just very, very, I'll say, smart when it comes to story. He really knows how to write for an audience. He's great at dialogue. And he just does a wonderful job of weaving the story and the message together, like you're talking about with Night Guard. The message is in there, but it's subtle, but not so subtle that you miss it. However, again, he's not shoving it down your throat and trying to like force you, hey, this is the message. Hello, this is the message. Right. And so he just does a great job of weaving message and story together in a very entertaining way. And he just got a great personality and just very easy to work with. And someone that I've enjoyed working with on many projects. And Jonick, who was the director, I would call him an actor's director in that he really tries to understand where you're going with the character and what your needs are as a performer and how you approach the work. And so that way I remember on set when I had probably the most emotional scene for me, he was asking me questions like, do you want a limited crew on set? Would you prefer that no one talks to you, so you can stay prepared and all of that? And he was very, very considerate and in tune to the actors' needs, so that way they can have the space they need to give their best performance. So both Jonick and Nathaniel Skexnader just did a great job, and are just great people to work with. And I've worked with both of them on multiple projects, and they're just really great people.
So actress Gigi Orsillo says her family loves superhero flicks. Where can we see Night Guard?
Night Guard is available right now on Redeem TV. So I believe you have to create a free account in order to be able to watch it. But it's available on Redeem TV right now. So if you go to redeemtv.com, it'll either show up in new releases, and if it doesn't, just search Night Guard. And I know it's going to some other platforms at a later date, but I do not know when or what those platforms are going to be. But as I said, as of right now, redeemtv.com.
Awesome, dude. I'm telling you, dude, I really love it. Gigi says always love working with an actor's director, and that you can't beat that on set when the director gets it right. He understands what's making you tick more or less, and it kind of guides you through the scene. Great. RedeemTV.com. Everybody, check it out. Night Guard with Jonathan Wessel. Also, Wayne Matichuk and Gary Nation are in this short as well. Two really, really good actors, and they're a part of it. So check it out, redeemtv.com with Jonathan Wessel, Night Guard. So you also did a couple of other shorts as well, Jonathan, that I had a chance to check out, which were pretty good. They're like really shorts, like 5 to 8 minutes. One was 8 for 8, and the other one was, I think, Two Roads. Tell us a little bit about those.
Well, 8 for 8 was made for a 48-hour film contest for the Christian Worldview Film Festival. I want to say that was 2019 was when that one came out. And or it might have been 18, but I think it was 19. I forget the dates. But so the idea of the short film, the 48-hour film contest, is that they pick the film festival picks a theme based on a Bible verse that you have to use as the basis for your film. Okay. The message or the theme for that year was building a solid foundation. And so what we did was, or what Nathaniel, who was the director for that, what Nathaniel did is he created this story, which is basically about this law student who ends up taking a job with a friend as a repo man, and there discovers how his life's not being built on a solid foundation, but it's being built on a foundation of sand. And going with more of the really dramatic, intense aspect of story, which is really nice. And that was fun to do because that, like I said, that's a 48-hour film contest. So we had 48 hours to write the story, and film it, edit it, and submit it. So it was very, very fast, but we got it done, and it was a lot of fun. I was working with a lot of the same people I worked with on Night Guard, and just a lot of fun. And then Two Roads, I think I mentioned that earlier. Two Roads is a film that I put together last year, right at the beginning of the pandemic, because there was a film festival called the Quarantine Film Festival, which was being hosted or put together by several Christian filmmakers. And so what we did is I contacted Nathaniel Schexnayder, and he helped me come up with a story, and he wrote the script for me. And then I shot it in my car. And I brought in a couple of actors to do voiceover work. And funny thing about that, not a single actor or crew member was ever at the same location for the entire film.
Wow.
I had my reader was in Northern Illinois, Jonik Petri, actually. He helped me film it virtually. And then I had several actors from like, I want to say a couple in Chicago, one in Wisconsin, who did voiceover work, and then all the crew members, the composers in Colorado, some script consultants were in Texas, and so everyone was all spread out and never in the same location. So that was a lot of fun to do and very challenging, especially for my first short film. I think it's like 6 some odd minutes long. So that was really a challenge for me. First time doing it by myself with my phone, and so that was very, very much an interesting experience. And I had decided, because of what inspired me to that film partially was being stuck, not able to do anything, also not booking any work, and hadn't booked work recently at that time. So I had taken a virtual masterclass quite a few years ago. I want to say maybe 7 years ago, with Dustin Hoffman, and he talked about the idea that if you're not getting much work, it can be very discouraging and depressing and all that. But don't sit back and wait for people to hire you for stuff. Go out and make your own content. And that always stuck with me, that I was always kind of wary of trying to create my own content. And again, this is when I first started getting into film acting, so I didn't know a lot about it. And I was kind of like, it'll be a good idea, I suppose, but I don't know if I'd be any good at it. But at least be doing something and putting my skills to use as an actor. And so at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to take his advice, and I'm going to try making a short film. And it actually did decently well at the festival, at this virtual festival. I want to say it was a finalist in 3 categories, I think, which is really nice to get some finalist nominations, which was really nice for my first project. So I was really happy with that.
So Gigi Arcillo was saying that Nathan Blair headed up the film festival.
Yes, that is true. Him and Laura Ann, who lives in Georgia and has started her own production company, was a part of that, and I'm not sure who all else was actually like super involved, but I know those two were, I think, the spearheaders of it.
You know, I really enjoyed both of the shorts, and particularly Two Roads. It was quite interesting. It was a powerful message there because you're succeeding in the secular world, doing it their way. It's yielding high rewards, and then you're faced with a decision that could get you booted out of that world. When you're not a member of that world, you're a member of the world that Christ runs. And you go, oh, and you had to make that crossroads decision. It was a do or die deal. I mean, but what I loved about the end result, because you end up making the right decision and you do pay the price, you know, for making that right decision. But the beautiful thing to me that I took away from the film, it's like that peace that God gives you is worth more than all the money in the world. Like, you know, your mom called you and she's like, are you okay? And you weren't okay when she called you before because you didn't know what you're going to do. And it was amazing when you made I just loved the message was making the right decision for Christ is worth everything.
Yes. Yeah, and I found it interesting that Nathaniel, who wrote the script, and we kind of went back and forth with ideas and kind of working out some details. The ending was the hardest part to come up with, only not story-wise, but just logistic-wise, how to make it work, to make it easiest to shoot. But there was no question in either of our minds how it should end. And because the whole point is, you know, you've got two roads ahead of you, and you got to figure out which one are you going to take. And it's very, very much not the typical ending, I guess you could say, that most people would expect, with everything turning out great at the end by the end of the film. Because, and I say it this way, he has to decide if he's going to take the path of moral conviction or monetary convenience.
Yes.
And he goes with the choice that is morally correct. If you haven't watched the movie yet, spoiler, but it's one of those things where he makes the correct choice, and not everything is all tied up nicely in a bow at the end of the film when the credits roll, but you see that inner peace he has of making the right choice, and knows that going forward he can trust God, and knows that things will turn out for God's glory. So that's the whole point of that film. You may make a choice that doesn't seem to be in your best interest now, but it's not about now, it's about the future and what God wants for you.
And really the point, money, all the money in the world without Christ does not equal peace.
Yes.
Because the greatest treasure that you could ever receive, which is all the money in the world, is peace. And that was the message. Like, oh, and so the person that's watching that doesn't understand that, you know, they don't know who the Lord is. It's very impactful. I love it. That's 8 for 8. Two Roads, also, ladies and gentlemen, by Nathaniel Schexnayder. It stars Jonathan Wessel. Check it out. Awesome films. Now, you have a big stage background coming from Chicago. What is your preference? Stage, live theater, or film?
I definitely prefer film over stage. I just find it more enjoyable. Part of that is just because I get to travel to many different places, different states, meet a lot of different people, learn a lot of new skills. In theater, you don't really get to learn a lot of new skills per se, because generally the plays keep things very constricted due to the limits of theater. And so you get to learn a lot of different skills, go to a lot of really cool places, and some not so cool places. But I like the intimacy I like the intimacy of the camera. I just like how you can be more focused on character in a way that you don't feel, or at least I don't feel like I'm having to overact, or do anything to make it, reach an audience, as it were. In theater, you tend to feel like you have to be a lot bigger and in some cases over the top, and I'm not too big into that, honestly. But each has their own unique challenges, and theater is very challenging because you get 4-6 weeks maybe of rehearsal time, and then you have to do the performances, and you're going from start to finish with no breaks. And so you basically have the pressure to get it right the first time. You don't have the ability to call cut and go back and redo it if you mess up. So you learn to really know your stuff, and push through any obstacles that may come up, any problems that arise, work through those. So that's what is really good about theater, and getting a good theater background can be really, really helpful. But some challenges with film would be difficult film locations. Sometimes it's, you're put into situations where it's like, this is going to be very difficult to shoot this comfortably. And we talked about unpleasant conditions on sets as well. I did a short where the entire scene, we had to have rain. So we're standing out there for hours just getting soaked constantly for like 3 full days of shooting.
That's tough.
So I'll say I don't mind that as much. I mean, I wouldn't want to stand out in the rain in normal life and just get drenched, but on a film, I'm all for it.
Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, you're working long hours too, at least 10, 12 hours, and probably closer to 14 hours. I think I've done shoots where we've gone as much as 16, 17-hour days. And so you get very little sleep. You may not be, as an actor, you may not be working as constantly as the crew is, but you find yourself getting drained emotionally, physically, mentally. And that repeats for however many days you're shooting. So it can be, and depending on the project too, especially if it's like a Christian film, it can be very spiritually draining too. And just the challenges that come up. I think there are more challenges, logistically speaking, with film than there is with theater. And so it's like a higher pressure situation to get things done. You've got time constraints, and you only have so much time to get a certain shot done. So as an actor, you're trying to give your best performance. And you may only get 1 or 2 takes, and so you got to really be on the ball. So there's a lot of unique things for each, but I definitely lean towards film when it comes to which I prefer.
And from the challenging standpoint, just from the mechanics of acting itself, performing, do you find stage or film more challenging in that respect?
I still find film, I think, more challenging. You get also as an actor, you get less time to prepare, as it was, and then there's constant, or there can be rewrites and things to a script right up until you shoot. Whereas with theater, the play typically is not going to change at all. It might be something you've even performed in previous years, and so you're just kind of dusting it off and bringing it back out. So I think in a lot of ways, film kind of trumps that when it comes to difficulties.
Sure. Kevin Scott Collier says your acting tips video series was very informative, helpful to many just entering the field. Do you plan on doing more like these?
I'm considering it. I've been very busy with a lot of other things coming up, and it does take a lot of work to put together the acting tip videos. I tend to be very detailed and thorough in them, so that tends to make them run on the long side, and because there's just so much to talk about. So it takes quite a while, and then if things kind of lighten up as far as my schedule goes, and I have a little bit more time to focus on that, I definitely will try to put some more of those together. And if people have suggestions for things they wanted me to talk about as far as different aspects of acting, I would love suggestions, because I really want to be able to put out content for my videos that are directly answering questions that people have about acting, as opposed to trying to just figure out, what should I address next? Because I want to be sure I'm answering people's questions about things.
Now, when it comes to butterflies on stage, you definitely have more of that when you're doing live stuff in theater, but and just in general, how do you deal with butterflies and nervousness before you perform? Do you have a process that you go through to kind of stay calm?
Mm-hmm. Well, I always struggled with it when I was younger.
Yeah.
I was, I think every human goes through a stage when they're little kids. Nothing seems to bother them. They never get nervous about going up to strangers and talking to them or anything like that. Then when you get to a certain age, maybe like your teen years, junior high, you can tend to be more introverted and get scared to talk to people or public speak or act. And then that may carry on into your adult life, or it may go away. It's hard to say. I think most people, fear of public speaking is the number one fear. So I think most everyone as an adult would have that problem. But it was interesting because I tried a lot of stuff when I was younger, when I would get nervous and go on stage, and nothing really seemed to help. I was always still really nervous. But then when I went to acting school, the first thing that we actually learned was how to really listen to your scene partner, put all of your attention on their behavior and how they're behaving towards you through their body language, their tone, all of that, and letting that affect you, and responding truthfully from that. And if you put all your attention on your scene partner, you don't have room to put your attention on an audience who's watching or anything. And I discovered very quickly in that acting class that once I started doing that, maybe after like just a couple of weeks even, I totally forgot that there were people in the room watching me, and there was a teacher there evaluating me, and I was no longer nervous. And to be honest, I actually don't get nervous anymore when I perform on stage or on film. I sing, and so I do get nervous when I have to go up and sing somewhere. But as far as acting goes, I don't get nervous anymore. And I think part of that is I've just gotten used to it, but also just where my focus is, I just feel so comfortable that the nerves aren't there anymore.
Oh, that's I love it. That's quite interesting. Because you started acting at a very young age, and over the years, I'd be interested to know. Venus Monique says listening to your scene partner always helps. And that's a great method, something that I'll try to keep in mind myself, because I'm kind of I'm a newbie to acting, so that's great advice. But you started when you were young. What's the biggest thing over the years that you've been associated with acting that you have learned, Jonathan, that's actually made you a better actor?
Well, most of what I learned about acting came in my mid-20s when I started taking acting lessons. And that really opened the door for me as far as improving. And it's definitely responding truthfully with the other actor, just really being fully present in the moment with them, taking what you're getting rather than having a preconceived response. I think a lot of actors go through and they plan exactly how they're going to respond, what facial expression they're going to make to something someone says, the exact tone and inflection they're going to use in a line, and they say it that way over and over and over again because they think that's getting the idea across. But I learned when I started learning about really listening and responding truthfully and just letting the other person's behavior affect me, taking it personally and responding off of that, my acting just grew tremendously. And I think that was a big thing. I would also say going for real emotion is going to be really helpful as well, because an audience can tell when you're faking emotion. They can see right through crocodile tears. So I think learning a method of using your real emotion for the character, discovering what the character's emotion is in the scene, and then finding a way to experience that emotion for real, will really increase your acting ability so much. And what makes it difficult is, and I'm not going to say too much about this only because this is a topic I could go on for hours about, but really just listening to, I'm sorry, I'm getting off train of thought. It's kind of going off right here. When it comes to the emotional aspect, vulnerability is key. You have to be willing to be vulnerable if you're going to be an actor, if you want to be a really, really great actor, because the whole point of stories is showing characters in their most vulnerable places. And so if you're not willing to be vulnerable, it's going to really stifle your acting. So learn to free your emotions so that way you can use them when you need to, which is going to be all the time as an actor, and allow yourself to be vulnerable to experiencing that emotion. And I guess people talk about vulnerability a lot. They say, yeah, you need to be vulnerable, but what does that actually mean? And I think it's talking about vulnerability is the idea of letting yourself experience those emotions in front of people, letting them see what you're going through rather than trying to be all stoic and macho about it. And so that'll really help your acting a lot.
Oh man, I love it. I love it. Just to switch gears a little bit, Jonathan, what do you think in your opinion, what do you think the current state of faith-based films are at this point in this era of filmmaking? What's the current state in your mind?
Yes, and this is definitely my opinion, and I know this is an area that there's a lot of different opinions on. So, obviously, Christian films have come a long way in the some 30, 40 years that Christian films have started to actually come around. But I still think they have a long way to go as well. I think there are a lot of filmmakers that have the mindset of, well, it's, we're doing this for to honor God, and so as long as we give it our best, and it's not the greatest film, but we just gave it, we have our hearts in the right place. I should say, if our hearts in the right place, it doesn't matter how good it is. And I feel that's very detrimental to Christian filmmaking. I think there's also the thought of, well, we don't want to be like Hollywood, so we got to be different. And I agree, we need to be different from Hollywood in content, but not in quality. And so I think some filmmakers get the idea that, well, we need to do everything differently, from how we approach a script to how we shoot it, just everything. And really, we should strive, again, this is my opinion, but I think we should strive to have Hollywood's quality of filmmaking, the level of lighting, cinematography, sound, acting. We should have that level of skill, but with Christian content. When I say Christian content, I don't just mean, specifically biblical stories or Christian themes, but even just good stories that don't necessarily have overt Christian message to them, but are still have value as far as story goes and have good moral messages in them. And there's also, it's hard to even quantify what a Christian film is too, because there's so many different opinions on what makes a Christian film. And like, for example, are Christian films different from faith-based films, or are they the same? Some people would say they're different. Some would say they're the same. Some people would say The Passion of the Christ is a faith-based film. Some would say it isn't. Some would say it's a Christian film. Some would say it's not. They'd say it's faith-based but not Christian. So there's just a lot of differing opinions on what constitutes a Christian film or faith-based film. And I think for some of that, some of it's pretty obvious. Like you'd say, oh, definitely Kendrick Brothers, Christian films. But other projects, and I'm blanking on specific films that would be considered faith-based, other than Passion of the Christ, faith-based, but not necessarily Christian, in my opinion. So it's really hard to quantify that. But in general, the independent Christian film industry has come a long way, but there's still a long way to go.
Now, with that being said, do you think that secular audiences are starting to become more attracted to faith-based or slash Christian films?
That's a good question. And I think I kind of alluded to that when I was talking about faith-based versus Christian and like what constitutes that. Because some secular audiences find them interesting. and others don't. And because it's hard to quantify what is a Christian or faith-based film, it's kind of hard to say where, at least in my opinion, where the secular audience is at as far as interest in those kinds of films. But I think the Spirit's working on people's lives, on unsaved people's lives, and film is definitely a very powerful way to bring the unsaved in. And not even just with not overt Christian messages necessarily. It can be just faith-based films that have a good story without like hitting you over the head with the gospel, can garner secular audiences' interest in it, and the Holy Spirit can use that to kind of lead them into questions about faith and God, and bring them closer to Him, as well as kind of get them more interested in possibly looking at Christian film. But at the same time, a lot of Christian films, due to the lack of high quality, a lot of secular audiences can't get behind that. And I think actually, you know what? Part of that too is not just the lack of great quality in some Christian films, but it's also just how overt the message is. People, atheists and other non-Christians or even people who grew up in a Christian home or in a church that don't really follow it anymore because they had a bad experience. They go to watch a Christian film that just constantly is hitting you over the head with the Bible. They get really turned off by that. They're like, I got this in church when I was a kid and I didn't like it, so I'm not going to want to, watch these movies now. But if you present the gospel, or you present a good Christian film in a way that's engaging, entertaining, inspiring, moving, all of that, and it's done with really great acting, great cinematography, sound, all of that, it can start to work on a person, or I should say the Holy Spirit can start to work on a person to bring them closer to Him. So that being the case, it's really hard to say where the secular audience is at when it comes to acceptance or interest in Christian film, but we definitely need to do a better job in the quality of our films in order to make it more, I don't want to say appealing to to a secular audience, because I don't want to imply that we need to make content that's like Hollywood, because I'm not saying that at all. But we definitely need it to be in a way that the audience goes, wow, that trailer looked really, really good. And it's some faith-based film or something like that, but man, that trailer got me hooked. I'm going to watch this movie. And they go, whoa, that was a great movie. Maybe they start following the Christian actors. Maybe they start following the Christian filmmakers and start to actually learn more about Christianity through that, and their eyes are open to it. So it can be a great pathway to the gospel, and not even just through the content of the film, but through the people making it and their testimonies.
And I never really considered that as being a heavy element in the production of faith-based films. Like, the quality means a heck of a lot to the secular viewer. Like, whoa, you really need to get their attention. Kevin Scott Collier says, do you think a trap for some indie filmmakers is the vanity project, when they essentially make a movie for themselves, not taking the general market into consideration?
Yeah, and this is a little out of my area of expertise, I would say, because my focus is on acting. But I would say, I think that if you're making a movie for yourself, for your own purposes, rather than thinking about who your audience is, who you're trying to reach for this film, then I think it's going to be very detrimental, because the audience can't get behind that. Right. They start to watch the movie and they go, this is boring, or whatever their reason is, and they stop watching. And so I think if you need to know who your target audience is, what message you're trying to get across to them, and do it in the best way you can, the best possible quality and everything. I'm not sure that answers the question, but I think that's a big thing too, is you need to be sure that you're not doing it in a self-serving way.
Sure. Dave Ebert said he loved what you said about acting and responding naturally to your scene partner. And he's a comedic improvisationalist, and he wants to know if you've ever done improv.
I have. I've never taken official improv classes, which is in a way interesting, because I'm less than an hour away from Second City in Chicago, which is very famous improv school.
Yeah.
But I have done improv and things like that when I was younger. And when I was actually I took Meisner for acting. And when I was in the Meisner class, we did an exercise called repetition, which is the foundation exercise that Meisner came up with for how to really listen to your scene partner. And by listening, he meant their body language, their intonation, their behavior, everything, not just the words they say, but everything about them. That's giving indication to what's really going on inside of them.
Yeah.
And while I was in class, there were several other classmates that were also studying improv. They were going to the conservatory at Second City, and they said that Meisner doing this exercise was really helping them with their improv, and they also felt that their improv was helping them with their Meisner classes as well. So I think that if you're doing something like Meisner, that can really help with your improv work. But definitely improv can be really helpful too, to learning how to work with somebody else and get your focus off of yourself. Because what's that expression they use? Yes, and in improv, the idea you go along with whatever's being said rather than, oh, that doesn't make sense, or whatever. So I think
you
improv,
roll with it in improv. Yeah.
yes, you definitely roll with it. And I would say it's very similar in Meisner, except that it's not you just go along with whatever the other person says. You respond truthfully from your point of view. So if they say something and that doesn't align with your point of view on it, then you disagree with them because you're responding truthfully. You're not just going along for the sake of the story. Right. And I will just mention this as an acting thing real quick, because it goes along with this. Part of your job as an actor is to learn and discover what the character's point of view is. Because what makes everybody different? Their point of view. No one has the 100% same point of view. So as an actor, you need to find your character's point of view. And then there's different methods. And I studied Meisner, so I would use Meisner's different techniques and things in order to get yourself into alignment with the character's point of view. Some people say you're stepping into the character's shoes or whatever. I say you align yourself with their point of view, or you marry your point of view with the character's point of view. So you're both approaching life in the same perspective. And that's really going to be a key too for acting as well when you're working on character and how do you play a character.
Yes. And clearly you are a man of God, Jonathan. I want to ask you, as a performer, when you are performing, doing what you do, how does your faith influence you as an actor?
Well, it does influence me a lot because there are, different types of, even just in the Christian film industry alone, there's so many different theological views on things. So depending on, what my own theological beliefs are, it'll affect the kind of projects I'll work on, because if there's a project that is just, for example, in the specifically Christian film industry, if there's a project that's really, I think, way off base with what I believe, and so is teaching something that I think is heretical, I wouldn't get on board with that project because it's not something that I believe, particularly as being true. That's not to say that certain viewpoints or certain aspects of belief are not something that we can necessarily, I'm trying to think how to phrase this. There are different beliefs. There are certain things that we can disagree on that are not going to be like major issues. But like if there's a filmmaker who's making a film that's all about, God is a woman, or there is no Trinity, and that's the whole point of their film. It's like, I'm not going to be involved in that. But as far as, other things, secular films and whatnot, well, even in the Christian film industry, there's a lot of different opinions that filmmakers have on standards with, as far as the content goes, and what kind of stuff they're willing to show or not show, or say or not say. And so it's getting very difficult to find projects that I'd be comfortable working on in that respect, even. I think that answers your question. I hope it does.
It does, and it's an interesting point of view that you have, because I never really totally stopped and considered. Kristen, yes, Jonathan is excellent in Night Guard, 8 for 8, Two Roads. Absolutely, Kristen. We love it. We were touching on it a little bit earlier. Excellent works. But no, I never considered that there are different mindsets in Christendom too that we don't necessarily align with.
Yeah.
Just because it's faith-based / Christian, it's like, yo, they're on something else. So anyway, I get it, Jonathan. That's a great point. I never thought about it like that. But yes, I agree with you. And Jonathan, you're a pretty young guy. I'm 56, so I can say that. Do you have any words of advice that maybe you could leave with young aspiring actors and actresses that, around about your age or younger that are thinking about making this a full-time career?
Sure. And it's important that you said full-time career, because I think a lot of people go into this with an aspect or a thought process of, oh, this is something I'll do for fun every once in a while, and that's fine if you want to try that. But if you're looking at this as a career, then you have to treat it like any other career. And I would say that means you got to go to acting school. Because, if you're going to become a lawyer or a doctor or anything else, you got to study, you got to train to be able to do the skills.
Yes.
And if you're going to be a professional actor, you can make this your full-time career, you need to go to acting school, because it's going to really give you a solid foundation to work from. Before I started studying acting, man, I was all over the place with my performances in plays and stuff. And it's like, man, I was bad. And I'm not saying that I'm like tremendous now, but I've definitely improved through acting classes. It's opened my eyes to this whole system of working on a role. And the philosophy behind acting that was different than just, oh, it's pretending or making it look like you're doing something or making it look like you're upset. But this is the philosophy behind it. So learning that's going to be really helpful for a longevity of a career. Also, you got to realize that this business is really tough, and some people do way better than others right off the bat. Some people, they get into filmmaking and it's like they're booking stuff, one after the other. And it's like, whoa, that's really great. Other people, and this is the case with me, it's like films come and go, and like there may be really long spells where nothing happens. Yeah. And you can go through a lot of self-evaluation and depression and feelings of rejection because you're not booking anything. And at that point, you have to realize, is this what I'm meant to do? You start to think of those questions. And so praying about it, asking God to guide you if this is the career path he wants you to go on, it's going to be really important, having faith in that. And I realized it was something that God wanted me to do. As I was, pursuing it, I was doing a lot of different jobs, in order to be able to support myself aside from acting. And I never truly felt like this is where I need to be. This is where I want to be. This is where I'm going to stay for a long time. But whenever I got on a film set, it was like, I feel deep inside this feeling of this is what I'm meant to do. Right. And whenever it seemed like whenever I started to have doubts about my career, and that's being able to be a full-time career for me, God would bring something along that would kind of get me back into it and kind of keep me going and keep me motivated. So and I will say this, if you're trying to get into this business as an actor because you want to be famous, you want to make a lot of money, you want a lot of recognition or whatever it is, then you're in it for the wrong reason, because this is such a tough business to be in, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people wanting to do the same thing that you want to do. And I'll admit, when I was younger, it was like, oh man, I want to be an actor so I can be famous and make a lot of money and everything like that. But as I got older, and I was watching more movies and things like that, and I really began to be impacted and inspired by the movies I was watching. It was like, this is what this movie is doing to me emotionally is what I want to be able to do through film. I want to be able to touch other people the same way these movies are touching me. Yeah. And that was my drive for making movies, or I should say acting in movies. And so if you're looking at acting as a young, upcoming actor, or you're thinking about it, look at why you want to do it. If it's because you want to be rich and famous, then forget it, because there's no guarantee you're going to be either of those things. Most 99% of actors in Hollywood even have to work a second job to maintain a living. All the big celebrities you see that are actors, they're like the 1% of all actors. So you're not going to necessarily be super successful at it. But if you're doing it because you have a heart for telling stories, and you feel it's what God's calling you to do with your life, then stick with it. Work through those tough times. Do what you need to do to survive in this world, meaning, take on other jobs when things get slow. Start off doing acting part-time until things really start to get busy and you can support yourself off of that. But just don't give up right away if you believe this is what God really wants you to do, and keep praying and seeking God's direction in it.
Awesome advice, Jonathan. I love it. And this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you being on the Maurice Brown Show. Before we get out of here, do you have any upcoming projects on the horizon?
Yeah, so there again, as I was just saying, there are times of a lot of stuff going on, and there are times where there's not much. And right now things are really slow. But I do have a couple things that are in the works right now. You mentioned earlier The Over Mountain Men, which was a film I did in 2016. That was the second film in a trilogy. And they are planning to shoot the third film perhaps later this year. So that's a project that I would be involved in. Okay. And also, Night Guard is currently in the stages of development for a TV series. So right now, the showrunners are working through financing options for the whole first season, as well as writing episodes and getting things kind of moving in a path towards that. So I'm really looking forward to the possibility of that happening and being able to return to the Night Guard universe, because it's such a great story, and I would love to see it come to a full series with several seasons.
Well, I'm definitely going to be looking forward to that. That is a great short film. There's no question about that. Dave Ebert says congrats, and you do deserve a big congrats for that. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with the actor Jonathan Wessel, who can be seen in Night Guard. He's got a couple of shorts out called 8 for 8, Two Roads, The Over Mountain Men. They're working on a trilogy for that as well. If you like this video, like and share and subscribe to the Maurice Brown Comedy channel. And if you came in at the very end and you went, oh gosh, I missed it, it's over, you can see it again tonight on the Creative Motion Network on Roku TV. As a matter of fact, you may not even have to wait that late. It should be posted by 5 p.m. or 4 p.m. this evening. Jonathan Wessel on the Maurice Brown Show. Jonathan, and I want you to stick around. I got a couple of things I want to ask you about after the show, so hang out.
Sure.
We've been talking, ladies and gentlemen, with Jonathan Wessel. Jonathan, thank you so much, my friend, for being on the show. And I tell you, dude, I am going to be praying not only for Night Guard, but your future. And, dude, I pray the peace of Christ, my friend, be upon you and your family. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Maurice.